Arguably the biggest event in former LAPD detective Russell Poole's theory that dirty cops and a mortgage broker killed rapper Biggie Smalls was the raid on the house of David Mack, the former LAPD officer who was arrested for robbing a bank in late 1997. Because this raid provided Poole with most of his actual, so-called evidence, all of it circumstantial, that he would then use to tie Mack to Biggie's murder. But here, I'm going to show you the LAPD investigation's official follow-up report for the raid on David Mack's house. And like so many of the other case files that I've shared, once you actually look at the evidence, you'll see that almost everything that has been reported about this raid is false. Eight months after Biggie's murder, on November 6, 1997, LAPD officer David Mack robbed this bank near USC's campus in Los Angeles, making off with a staggering $722,000. Mack reportedly had at least 3 conspirators working with him. One of them was a guy who stole a van from a budget rent-a-car near LAX the day before to use as their getaway vehicle. Another conspirator was Mack's so-called girlfriend, who worked at this bank branch as the branch customer service manager, and who moved funds around that morning so there would be far more cash on hand than normal, $722,000, equivalent to $1.4 million in today's money, ensuring the score was bigger. Unfortunately for Mack, having the extra cash on hand raised suspicions, and it would lead to a break in the case when detectives flipped his girlfriend against him after she failed a polygraph test. When David Mack and another conspirator entered the bank, Mack first attempted to enter the safe deposit box area, which is where his girlfriend worked, but was stopped by an unarmed security guard. Mack then went to his girlfriend's teller window, pretended to fill out a form, and told her, "Open the fucking door or you'll be the first to die," and flashed a submachine gun inside his coat that later turned out to be a Mac 11. His girlfriend then led him into the vault, where Mack ordered 2 employees to get on the ground, telling them, "I want the Brinks money that was just delivered. Give me the money. Don't hit those pagers or I'll kill you. It's not worth dying for. Don't give me any of that funny money." Mack grabs the $722,000 in cash that's just been delivered to the vault and walks out with it. As he's walking out, one of the employees that he'd ordered to get on the floor does activate a body alarm pager that activates the bank's silent alarm and surveillance cameras. In the lobby, Mack yells at a security guard to close your eyes, but instead, the guard goes to a phone and attempts to call the police. And that's when another conspirator of Mack's, who's been posing as a customer up until now, pulls a gun on the security guard and says, "Put the phone down or I'll shoot," which the guard complies with. David Mack and the other robber make their escape in the stolen van, which is driven by a third person who stayed outside in the van waiting for them. On December 16, 1997, 6 weeks after the bank robbery, police arrested David Mack for the crime. But even his arrest has been misrepresented over the years, most egregiously in the film City of Lies, starring Johnny Depp as Russell Poole, which was an adaptation of the book Labyrinth, which was the first book about Poole's theory. In this movie, they show Mack getting arrested in the middle of a backyard pool party at his house, surrounded by a crew of gangster stereotypes, sparking a tense standoff where it looks like Mack is gonna pull a gun.
"I'm not gonna ask you again. Put the gun on the ground."
In reality, David Mack was arrested alone outside of a supermarket near his house. They waited outside for him to exit the market, and he was taken into custody peacefully, without incident. Which is how we portrayed it in the scripted series Unsolved for Netflix and Universal. So again, if you want more accuracy, watch Unsolved. But portraying Mack as a hardcore gang member has always been one of the keys to making Russell Poole's theory more plausible. Incidentally, in another scene in City of Lies, Johnny Depp as Russell Poole looks at a bulletin board displaying photos from the case. And these appear to be screenshots taken from my film, Murder Rap. I know this because they're in 16:9 aspect ratio, and because this image here is literally B-roll footage that I shot myself from the roof of the Peterson Automotive Museum's parking garage. It's amusing, and I like the symbolism of Russell Poole looking to Murder Rap for the answers. Getting back to the bank robbery, the getaway driver of the van was never found, and neither was the stolen $722,000, at least not most of it. When he was arrested, Mack had over $1,500 cash on him and a blue steel 9mm Smith & Wesson handgun. Russell Poole claimed later that he was denied permission to obtain the ballistic evidence that might have connected Mack to the Biggie murder. And some people pushing Poole's theory in recent years have implied that no ballistics test was ever done comparing Mack's guns with the rounds that killed Biggie. But this is the ballistics report that was conducted on all of the guns found in Mack's possession, tested by the LAPD back in 1998, after the FBI was done processing it themselves. And you can see it's being compared to evidence from case number 97-07-11963. That's the case number for Biggie's murder. And this shows that none of Mack's firearms were a match for the bullets that killed Biggie. $2,600 in cash was recovered from a chest of drawers in Mack's house, and receipts totaling $18,000 were also found, all for cash payments for leather furniture, car stereo equipment, home remodeling, and loan payments, plus another $3,500 paid for the purchase of a Chevy Blazer, and another $8,000 deposited into Mack's personal checking account the day of the robbery. All of these transactions were made in the weeks since the bank robbery, so police assumed those cash and receipts were from the robbery. But the remaining $689,000 was never recovered. Detectives even searched inside the walls of Mack's house using radar and a special money-sniffing dog with no success. Upon his arrest, David Mack told detectives to take your best shot. And they did. He was indicted for conspiracy to commit bank robbery, armed bank robbery, and using and carrying firearms during a crime of violence, and sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison. And he did his time, and he was released in 2010. His so-called girlfriend/accomplice pleaded guilty and got 2.5 years. David Mack was dragged into Russell Poole's theory about the Biggie murder when Poole saw that a few days after Mack's arrest for the bank robbery, a man named Amir had visited Mack in jail. And Amir was one of 5 first names given as Biggie's possible killer by a schizophrenic jailhouse informant and convicted murderer named Michael Robinson months earlier, who knew literally nothing about the case. Robinson also knew none of the details about how Biggie was killed. He didn't know where it happened.
Let me ask you this, do you know where Biggie was killed?
No, like I said, I don't read none of that type of stuff.
He didn't know how it happened.
I heard somebody just walk by, shot him in his truck by 5 or 6 times through the door of the truck or something. Just heard he shot, they went by, shot by with a machine gun or something.
He didn't know how the gunman escaped.
How did the guy get away? Did you ever hear anything about that?
They ran around the corner and got in a limo or a truck or something, drove off him.
He didn't know anything.
The man you're describing here
Yes.
is the killer.
Yes.
Okay, and you know him as Abraham?
Abraham, I told you the name yesterday, a name, Arab name.
Okay, you told me yesterday the name of
Amir.
Amir?
Yeah, Ashmir or Amir. It's an Arab name.
Do you know what they used to call him when he was a Southsider?
Might be Kenny or Kiki or something like that. I forgot. Kiki or something like that.
So at one point he was associated with either the Southsiders.
Yeah.
This initial connection was that flimsy. But then it was like Poole had his suspects, and now he was going to work backwards to make them fit the crime. In reality, David Mack and Amir Muhammad had been college friends at the University of Oregon. where Mack had been a major track star and a Pac-10 champion runner in the early 1980s, and at one point was expected to compete for gold at the 1984 Olympics, before his career was apparently sidelined by an injury. According to Amir Muhammad in his 2004 deposition with the Biggie estate's attorneys, who were suing the city of Los Angeles based on Poole's theory about the murder, he and Mack were roommates at the University of Oregon, and then Amir became godfather to Mack's kids later. Amir claims he and Mack's wife also met at the University of Oregon, and that he was actually better friends with her than with her husband. He claims he hadn't seen Mack in a year or more when he went to visit him in jail after the bank robbery arrest, and that the visit was at the request of Mack's wife because Amir was a mortgage broker and she was considering refinancing their house to pay for Mack's defense. And just like the Michael Robinson interview in summer of 1997, which I have played more of in other episodes, the raid on David Mack's house on this street a few months later, and what was found there, has been misrepresented over the years. And a big reason for this is that Russell Poole simply wasn't assigned to the David Mack bank robbery case. So he was an outsider on that investigation, and all of the claims he made about it were based on hearsay, things that he supposedly heard from detectives that were actually working that case. And people have just kept repeating that hearsay over and over again throughout the years, without checking the actual case files to see if the claims are true. The best example of this is the claim that Gecko ammunition, the type of high-powered submachine gun ammo that was used in Biggie's murder, was definitely found at David Mack's house. And all I can say is evidence of that has never been provided. The claim was printed in the book Labyrinth, where it got all of one sentence. A claim from Russell Poole that he'd supposedly seen it in a report from the detectives on the Mack bank robbery case, that they had found, quote, thousands of rounds of German-manufactured 9mm ammunition, exactly the kind of bullets that had killed Biggie Smalls. But the brand Gecko isn't even mentioned here, and we're supposed to just take Poole's word for it that he'd heard this from the detectives working that case. And there's nothing in the 13-page follow-up report on the David Mack robbery case, nor in the ballistics report about his guns and ammunition, that makes any mention of Gecko ammo, much less thousands of rounds of any ammunition being found in Mack's house. And again, Poole was not assigned to the David Mack bank robbery case. And in a follow-up book from the same author as Labyrinth, called Dead Wrong, a retired FBI agent who has pushed Poole's theory for years, also claims that he got the information about the Gecko bullets allegedly found at Mack's house in a report by Russell Poole. And this is just where it gets so convoluted for some reason. Whose report is this in? Poole himself claimed in Labyrinth that he'd seen it in somebody else's report, a report by detectives working the David Mack bank robbery case. So, Poole's writing reports based on what someone else wrote in a report that no one else has apparently ever seen? It doesn't make any sense. And because it was a bank robbery, the case was actually federal, meaning it was really the FBI's case. The FBI worked with LAPD Detective Brian Tyndall to solve it. So why would an FBI agent not pull his own agency's files on the case to confirm the details of what happened? Why are you taking the word of Russell Poole, who was never even assigned to that case? And even if this brand of ammunition had been found in David Mack's house, it was far from rare, which is a claim made by an FBI report about the Biggie case years later. And this claim was repeated again in the Dead Wrong book, stating that Gecko ammo was only sold in 2 stores in the entire US. But this seems to have confused Gecko distributors, of which there were only 2 in the US, 1 on each coast, with retailers, of which there were over 20 in Southern California alone. Another claim made by people pushing Poole's theory is that Biggie's killer or killers used stolen police radios to communicate with each other that night. And this is important because the FBI report also claimed that LAPD radios and scanners, plural, more than one, were confiscated from David Mack's house after his arrest. But there are a couple of big issues with this claim. One, Police radios are not a private conversation. They're not like cell phones. Anybody could have heard these guys over the airwaves saying something like, "Biggie's coming out, he's in the 2nd Suburban, get him," especially any other cops with police radios, or literally anyone with their own police scanner. And 2, according to the LAPD's follow-up report on the investigation into David Mack for the bank robbery, only 1 police radio was found at his house, not multiple radios. And that 1 radio was stolen on June 6th, 1997. That's nearly 3 months after Biggie's murder. It could not have been used in that crime. And even if it had been, you can't communicate with each other with just 1 radio. But there is one big thing you could do with a police radio that it would help you with: monitoring police response while committing a bank robbery. In fact, a witness who saw David Mack and his crew ditching the getaway van after the robbery noted that they appeared to be carrying what the witness described as police scanners. In fact, pretty much everything involving the accusations against David Mack for Biggie's murder, in my opinion, can be explained by the crime that he was actually convicted of committing: armed bank robbery. And other accusations against him have simply been exaggerated or proven irrelevant. It was claimed David Mack had a shrine to Tupac in his home. But in this entire 13-page follow-up report, Tupac's name isn't mentioned a single time, and there's no reference to any shrine. And Brian Tyndall, the lead detective on the Mack bank robbery case, reportedly said under oath in a deposition for the Biggie Estates lawsuit against the city that he didn't recall seeing any pictures of Tupac at Mack's house. And the LA Times reported that FBI photos of Mack's house also showed no posters or a shrine. And again, if an FBI agent is out there pushing Poole's theory, why haven't these photos of Mack's house been released? The closest thing to a so-called shrine may have been some CD inserts from various artists tacked to a wall in Mack's garage. But that's only a shrine to Tupac if you're trying to make your Biggie conspiracy theory sound more plausible. David Mack also owned a mid-90s Chevy Impala, which is the make and model of the car used in Biggie's murder. But Mack's Impala was black, while the closest witnesses to Biggie's murder were adamant the vehicle used was a greenish color.
What kind of car was it? It's Impala, man. It was Impala? Yes. What color was the blue? Aqua blue. Aqua blue. How many?
In fact, even Russell Poole seemed to know they were looking for a greenish-colored Impala in the early days of the investigation, because a flyer he personally distributed about the car said so. So at what point did he decide it was black? Or at least that it needed to be? And it never made sense to me that if you're smart enough to use a stolen vehicle in a bank robbery, why you would have somebody use your personal vehicle to commit such a high-profile murder on a busy street. A year after Biggie's murder, members of Biggie's entourage that night were re-interviewed, and one of them, Damian Butler, thought he might have seen David Mack in the parking garage at the Peterson Museum as they were walking in. But he also identified a second photo in that same lineup, photo number 1, as also being someone he may have seen at the party. But that photo was just a random one added to the lineup as filler. So how reliable is this identification? And Biggie's friend Lil Cease and his driver Gregory Young were shown the same photos and didn't identify anyone. And it's hard to believe someone would remember a random face in a crowd of hundreds of people over a year later. In closing, I get accused by some people of attacking Russell Poole in some of these deep dive episodes. But I challenge you to find anywhere here where I attack him personally. The truth is, I'm targeting his theory, and I'm doing it because there are still people out there promoting it. They don't get to hide behind Poole's legacy and avoid scrutiny just because he isn't around anymore. And I also challenge you to take what I've shown you in all of these episodes about Biggie's case, Michael Robinson's ridiculous interview, the exaggerations about David Mack and Amir Muhammad, and the other evidence, and challenge the people still pushing this theory to defend all of it, and to try showing the world what case files they have to back up their claims, like I always do here.